So I'm here today to talk about a classic that was well and truly spoiled for me. Probably not in the way it was spoiled for most people. And also to deliver the startling news that this is a better work of fiction than this. Salutations, fellow readers, writers, and killers of time on YouTube. My name is Martha Jones, and I would like to use the androgynous sounds of my voice to share with you a few words about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, a fascinating exploration of duality, specifically uptight appearance-based duality that kind of defined the Victorian, quote, sensibilities, unquote, published by a guy named Robert Louis Stevenson in 1886. It was remarkable at the time and remains remarkable today, for reasons including but not limited to the fact that Stevenson published it more than 30 years before Sigmund Freud published his postulations on the id and the superego in 1923. Despite appearances that Dr. Freud might have copied Stevenson's homework a little bit, he did add something important to existing postulations of duality, and that was the ego. That everybody kind of exists on a sliding scale between Jekyll and Hyde that varies depending on the day and the time of day, and some self-acceptance will go a long way toward not self-destructing, which is a lot more productive than attitudes like that of the hubris-filled Dr. Jekyll, who instead of accepting himself as a flawed human being, tried to shunt all of his socially unacceptable desires into an evil twin that happened to share his body. I have yet to see an adaptation that treats the Jekyll and Hyde story like the crime thriller with sci-fi elements the one finds in the book. Some dim-witted goof mistook this for a kid's story because of the lack of sex and the fact that it is relatively short, so for most of the English-speaking world, the story is well and truly spoiled by the time we are age 10 or so. I presume that is why most adaptations tend to shift the point of view from the character of Utterson, Jekyll's close friend and lawyer, to Jekyll himself, making his story less one of mystery and more one of suspense. We pretty much know from the get-go that there is no way for Jekyll's story to end well. What hopefully still makes the story interesting is the process of learning when and how it all falls apart. When motion pictures got hold of the Jekyll and Hyde story, they generally incorporated a transformation scene early on in the picture, since the transformation is the special effects showstopper, and what a fair amount of the audience bought tickets to see. Actors love the Jekyll and Hyde story because they get to play two diverse roles in a single production. Special effects people like it because the stark visual contrast between Jekyll and Hyde is built into the story. It is a show practically designed for artists on all sides of a multimedia collaboration to show off. My favorites are the Hyde transformations performed like David Hasselhoff did in the 90s and like John Barrymore did in the 20s. There are no cutaways, there are no trick shots. There's no ducking behind a desk so people can strategically glue crepe hair here and there. And everywhere. The actor merely writhes and convulses, and when next the audience gets a good look at his face, he's another person. Another thing about Hyde's appearance that occasionally gets a nod in various visual representations is that Hyde of the book is described as a shorter man than Jekyll. That's part of how they're not easily mistaken for each other, a thing the Doctor later credits to Hyde's immaturity. Not like a looking up body parts in the dictionary kind of immaturity, but in the sense that Hyde is an evil but adolescent version of Jekyll. Then as the experiment goes on, Jekyll notices the reflection of Hyde in the looking glass growing larger and more fully formed. As far as looking dramatically uglier than Jekyll, or to an extent prettier in adaptations like Professors Kelp and Clump, there's nothing especially repulsive about Hyde's appearance in the book, but he has the uncanny knack of making people hate him on sight. As Stevenson puts it, he gave an impression of deformity without any nameable malformations. He had a displeasing smile, and he spoke with a husky, whispering, and somewhat broken voice. All of these were points against him. Not all of these together could explain the hitherto unknown disgust and loathing and fear with which Mr. Utterson regarded him. Is it the houndstooth that makes people despise us on sight, Mr. Love? Because I don't think it endears us to a hell of a lot of people, if you know what I'm saying. The Jekyll to Hyde transformations alone are fascinating from a sociological standpoint. The features used to telegraph Hyde's ugliness inside and out tend to be based on whatever the broad-sweeping social anxieties are of the time in which a given adaptation was made. That's why sometimes Hyde is hairy and ape-like, suggesting he's less evolved than Jekyll, whereas other times he's dressed in loud colors and has ostentatiously greased hair, suggesting a confidence that is absent in his brainy counterpart. In my heart and soul, I think that Hyde is strongest when he uses the Doctor's insecurities in order to gain control of their mutual body. That is why in the 60s, Professor Kelp was willing to sacrifice his sound mind for the sound body of Buddy Love. And in the 90s, Professor Clump was willing to put himself through this.
Ain't that a bitch? What the hell?
Remember how stinking fat-phobic the 80s and 90s were? You do now. You're welcome sorry, says Eddie Murphy. But also having read the book and witnessing the sheer hypocrisy of Dr. Jekyll, all glory, laud, and honor productions like the one that David Hasselhoff gave us in the 90s, where physically there's not an appreciable difference between Jekyll and Hyde, except one has taken a wonder drug that allows him to forget his manners for a while. You could just about believe that the drug was a placebo. Or you could, if you didn't have the book spoiled for you in quite the way that I did. Again, not in the customary way that, spoiler alert, Jekyll is Hyde. But almost immediately after receiving this book, the person who gave it to me said, Do you think that the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is an addiction narrative? Well, now I do. Would the mountains have crumbled and the world imploded if you had brought this up after I had read the text? Because once you see it as an addiction narrative, it's mighty hard to see it any other way. And you feel like a dope for ever having seen it as anything else. Society's to blame. No, really. You introduce this to kiddos as a story for kiddos, who will trust that they don't have to think about it too hard because y'all didn't think about it too hard. Freaking grown-ups, man. But it is from this perspective that I can definitively say this is a better narrative than this one. Because some of my favorite humans are addicts in recovery. Dr. Jekyll does not represent my favorite humans. He represents users of persons with no intention of change who does not value the life of his buddies at least as highly as he does his own. And it's all there. The uptight guy who excuses himself from polite society for a while by taking a literal drug, pretending the rotten things he did while under the influence belonged to his evil twin and not to his own virtuous self. The lame justifications for why he should keep taking the drug even though he hurts people every time he takes it. The slow shift from doing the drugs so that he can stop being himself to requiring the drugs so that he can keep being himself. And the using of his friends to get the drugs. The language Hyde uses to get what he wants is precious, too. He forges a letter as Jekyll to a friend and colleague, Dr. Lanyon, including phrases such as, "There was never a day when if you had said, 'Jekyll, my life, my honor, my reason depend on you,' I would not have sacrificed my left hand to help you." And, "If you insist upon an explanation, you will have understood that these arrangements are of capital importance, and by the neglect of one of them you might have charged your conscience with my death." In other words, "Please, Lanyon, bring me my drugs. I would do anything for you." "Lanyon, bring me my drugs, or if I drive under the influence to get them, it'll be your fault." Due to the illness of other people, the part of Lanyon has in fact been played by Martha Jones. And I think as a reader, I would have put up with a lot more of Dr. Jekyll's shit if I had been shown what a darling human being he was when he was not under the influence, as opposed to merely being told that he was a darling human being. We are not privy to Jekyll's thoughts on anything until the bitter end, and when we read the doctor's notes, they are insufferable. After being used for drugs and made complicit in the shenanigans of Jekyll and Hyde, Lanyon dies of shock and revulsion. And of that incident that precipitated the death of his friend, Jekyll writes this: "When I came to myself at Lanyon's, the horror of my old friend perhaps affected me somewhat. I do not know. It was at least a drop in the sea to the abhorrence with which I looked back upon these hours." "Wah," says the doctor. "I'd offer you some cheese, but I know quite well that all you want is the wine." And again, my goal is not to spit fire at folks who are in active recovery from addiction. If that is you, I love you, I see you, and I thank you on behalf of your future self and loved ones. Dr. Jekyll is not that addict. At some point or other, Jekyll runs out of drugs. The prospect of new drugs are not satisfactory, and he is about to be found in his lab for what he is. And when Jekyll and Hyde have to decide very quickly between self-acceptance and suicide, they choose suicide. Compliments of the poison that the kind, saintly doctor happened to have around for some reason. And on breaking into the lab and observing the new corpse, Stevenson writes, "The chords of his face still moved with the semblance of life, but life was quite gone. By the crushed phial in the hand and the strong smell of kernels that still hung upon the air, Utterson knew that he was looking on the body of a self-destroyer." It's passages like that one that make me think that a writer of Stevenson's skill could have given us a little more pathos concerning the doctor. Wouldn't have taken much. Not so much as half a smidgen or a jot. All he would have had to do is add a line, maybe two, in which after the transformation at Lanyon's, Jekyll says, "Well, now you know. Are we still friends?" Because if Jekyll did have any prayer of recovery, he wouldn't have needed less support from his friends. He would have needed more. A Jekyll that was self-aware enough to put out feelers for whether recovery was even possible with the right kind of help would have been way more tragic for getting rejected by his friend. Like, don't get me wrong, the OG Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is a classic for a reason. But if we're looking at it through the lens of an addiction narrative, it is one-sided. Which is why retellings such as the Nutty Professors 60s version and a 90s version are such a strong narrative from both sides. In both of these films, we spend a lot of time with Professors Kelp and Clump. We see their insecurities, we see virtues in them that they might not see in themselves. We see them knocking themselves out to be what society wants them to be, and what would lead them, understandably, to want to be someone else. See, this is how the drunkard sees himself. People like drunk me better. Drunk me is cooler, better looking, more outgoing, more fun to be around. We see such potential in both of these characters, and our heart breaks when their worst selves try to take it away from them. As always, thank you for giving these videos a shot. Plan A was to end this video differently, but I don't think I can end my film better than this guy ended his film.
It's never really too late. And I think that the lesson that I learned came just in time. Because I found out something that I never knew. You might as well like yourself. Just think about all the time you're going to have to spend with you. If you don't think too much of yourself, how do you expect others to?
Take it easy, friends. I unironically love you. Bye. Like, share, subscribe, and buy my crap. Nobody asked you. As if the makeup and hair didn't tell the tale.